Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our session today, Digital Differentiation, Turning Your Plan Sponsor Website into a Competitive Advantage. I know you had a couple other really good sessions to choose from during this time slot, so I just want to start off by thanking you all for choosing to join ours today. My name is Andrew Way. I'm the Director of Research for the Annuities, Life Insurance, and Retirement Research teams at Corporate Insight, and I've been leading our retirement research for a little over 5 years now.
I'm Olivia Jack. I'm a senior analyst on the retirement team, and I've been working in this space for about 4 years now.
Now, for our presentation today, we're going to start off by providing a brief background of who Corporate Insight is, just in case a few of you in the room aren't that familiar. I promise I'll do my best to not make that sound too much like a commercial. Then we'll quickly jump right into the crux of our presentation, which focuses on 4 key themes. First, establishing the importance of the plan sponsor website. Second, analyzing plan sponsor digital preferences and usage patterns. Third, discussing how leading record keepers are doing in terms of meeting these expectations and these needs of plan sponsors with regards to the digital capabilities they're providing to them. And then lastly, we'll provide you all with some examples of some best practices that you can take away in terms of some leaders in these key areas of the plan sponsor website. At the end, we should also have a couple minutes of Q&A for you all, and then Olivia and I will be available throughout the conference at the booth, and you'll have our contact information at the end. Okay, so first a little advertisement in the beginning. So Corporate Insight, we are a market research and competitive intelligence firm that specializes in providing digital customer experience analysis to our clients who are primarily large insurance and financial institutions, but we've also branched out into some other areas recently. We can provide a litany of research services to our clients, but they can all be boiled down into the 4 main buckets you see on the right side of the slide there. That's UX research, digital audits, which I'll get into a lot more detail in later on, and we kind of leverage our digital audit for a lot of our presentation today, custom research, and monitor services. In terms of the research we've been doing in the retirement plan space, we've been operating and analyzing the DC plan participant and plan sponsor digital experiences since 2006. Now, I know it's kind of second nature to a lot of us in this room, where when you hear a year that starts in the 2000s, you immediately think, it's not that long ago. But consider this. I'm 31 years old, I've been married for 6 years, and I have a 1.5-year-old son at home. In 2006, I was just graduating high school. So trust me, that was a lifetime ago for some of us.
I think I was 12.
All right, and so before we really jump into the presentation, I also do just want to give you a little bit of background on a recent plan sponsor survey that we ran, because we're going to be referencing this throughout the presentation. So during the summer, we commissioned a survey of DC plan sponsors, and we got 338 total respondents. To qualify as a respondent, the person had to meet 2 benchmarks. First, they actually have to have an administrative role over their employer-sponsored DC plan. And then second, they had to indicate that they log into the plan sponsor website at a frequency of at least once per month. The primary purpose of our survey was to gauge and understand the digital preferences and usage of plan sponsors. There were a bunch of different questions in the survey, but sort of the crux of it was we asked sponsors to rate the importance of over 100 key sponsor site attributes on a 5-point scale. The exact wording of their response options were you had not at all important, not very important, somewhat important, very important, and extremely important. The reason I point out the exact wording is because we are going to be referencing that throughout the presentation. Also, a lot of the information we're going to be providing in the presentation, you'll see a lot of percentages we're throwing out indicating how important features are. Unless we indicate otherwise, those percentages typically represent top 2-box responses. So it's sponsors who indicated that the feature is either very important or extremely important. This survey also serves as the backbone of our DC plan sponsor digital audit, which I'll get a lot more into later in the presentation. So now, in terms of the crux of our presentation, we start off by simply asking the question, how important is the plan sponsor digital experience? Spoiler alert, the whole reason why we're here today is because it is, in fact, very important. So now, first and foremost, we asked plan sponsors a simple question. How important is the digital experience to the day-to-day of your job? Turns out it's pretty important to the sponsor's day-to-day. 75% of sponsors indicated that the website is either very important or extremely important to their day-to-day job function. Further, only 2% responded that it is not important, meaning 98% of these 338 sponsors that we surveyed stated that the plan sponsor website is indeed important to their day-to-day job function. Now, we also asked sponsors, well, actually, before we even get into the slide, I attend a lot of these conferences over the years, and we started hearing a lot over the last few years, especially by a lot of the salespeople at the booths, that the digital experience, both the participant and the sponsor digital experience, is playing like a larger role in RFPs. And I have numerous specific anecdotes of folks telling me that they've lost a plan or won a plan due to their digital experience. So in the survey, we did ask sponsors, hey, when your plan is up for bid, when you're potentially shopping for a new record keeper, what is more important to you? The plan sponsor digital experience or the participant digital experience. We also allowed them to answer that they're of equivalent importance. 91% of sponsors answered that the plan sponsor digital experience is either of equal importance or more important than the participant experience when they're deciding which record keepers to go with. 25% of sponsors straight out said that the sponsor experience is more important, meaning that only 9% of sponsors were not selfish and said the participant experience is more important. Now, we also were curious in terms of how sponsors deem mobile and how important mobile access was to them. So we started off by asking them in terms of the mobile section of the survey, hey, how important is it to you to have mobile access to some of the key features of the plan sponsor website? And 69% of sponsors said that it was either very or extremely important. And only 9% of sponsors responded that it was not important. Now, I think I've provided a lot of information to this point to kind of demonstrate the fact that the website is in fact important. But if you're not buying into it yet, don't just take our word for it. Take Tim Rousen's word for it. Just in case you don't know, he's the executive director of the Spark Institute. He was quoted recently in a plan sponsor article that they released accompanying with their 2019 plan sponsor record keeping survey, that he was expressing the prominence that the plan sponsor website and digital capabilities in total are now playing in the RFP process. Him and a few other experts quoted in the article specifically referenced cybersecurity, participant wellness metrics, plan analytics, and retirement readiness tools when discussing the importance of digital. Now, one last piece of the puzzle when we're discussing the fact that these sites are important is the engagement rates that sponsors have with the sites. Now, 68% of sponsors responded that they are logging into the plan sponsor website at a frequency of at least once per week. Now, when you compare that to the results of a recent DC Plan participant survey we had, that's quite a high engagement level. Only 10% of participants responded that they are logging into the participant website at this level of frequency. We also found some interesting information when we were dissecting the data by plan size. So the chart you can see to the right is charting the frequency options we provided sponsors on the y-axis, and we broke it down into 3 buckets: large plan sponsors, medium, and small. The large sponsors are indicated by the gray bars, the medium is like that teal light blue color, and the small are the navy bars. As you move down the chart, the frequency rate is higher, and you can see at least once a day and a few times per week frequencies, it's dominated by the larger plans. As you move up to the lower frequencies, it's the smaller plans that are dominating. And the reason for this is pretty simple. When you're looking at these organizations, a lot of small plans, the sponsors are not full-time plan sponsors. They're often HR folks or payroll specialists who one of many hats they wear is being a plan sponsor, so they just don't have the resources or the bandwidth to be logging into the sites at the same frequency.
How are you defining large, medium, and small?
Yeah, so that's a good question. For this chart, I think we bucketed off where small was under 50 million, medium was between 50 and 200, and large was over 200, I believe. I'm pretty sure that was how we defined it in this. Yeah. We did it by assets in the plan. So now that we've established the fact that the plan sponsor website is important, I think it's natural to then ask, well, what are the most important individual aspects of the plan sponsor digital experience? Now, the first thing we did is we provided plan sponsors with a list of about 20 essential site activities, and we asked them to indicate which of these activities have you actually performed over the previous 12 months. And it turns out that this activity data was dominated by looking up either plan information or participant information. This slide shows the 7 most often responded activities that sponsors are performing. All 6 of the top 6 are looking up plan information or participant information. The 7th that sneaks up on there is running a report, which is also tangentially related to looking up information. We then ask sponsors to indicate what very high-level feature categories are most important to them. Before I reference the over 100 site attributes, those are on the ensuing slides. These are kind of categorizations of all those attributes. These are all 9 high-level categories that we ask sponsors to rate the importance of. Again, this is that 5-point scale I talked about before. The percentages you see on the right side of the graph are the sponsors that indicated this category is very or extremely important. And website security and plan information are the most important category features. But as you can see, there's a clear top 6, and then there's a little bit of a drop-off. One thing I do want to point out that I found interesting on this slide is plan health tools in that second quadrant there. Now, at a quick glance, you might think the takeaway is, oh, they're not that important, but actually I want to posit the opposite. A few years ago, if I would have put plan health tools or analytics on this chart, they would have been far and away last. But over the past few years, plan health tools, plan analytics are a very hot button topic in the industry, and it's probably the thing our clients are asking us the most about. So really the takeaway here is the fact that 68% of sponsors are indicating that it's either very or extremely important really shows how it is an emerging importance feature on the plan sponsor digital experience. And it's one that still to this day, not all record keepers are providing on the sites. Yeah. Yeah, so this is, in surveys like this, it's really, we don't get too much into back-end algorithms or stuff like that, because those are things that no one that isn't actually the one working on it can really get a gauge on. But we find that sponsors are often looking at things like two-factor authentication. Can they reset their password? What are the requirements? Are there certain things in the site that they have to re-authenticate in order to submit a transaction? Things like that all fall under the guise of website security. Okay, and so, so now when we're looking at those individual site attributes I'm talking about, the most important site attributes are pretty dominated by 3 categories: security, web design, and plan data. This slide here showing the 7 most important website attributes as rated by plan sponsors, and all 7 of them fall into one of those 3 buckets. And the winner of the prestigious and also very made-up award for most important plan sites feature, as rated by our Corporate Insight Survey, is clear and logical site navigation. Obviously, it's a very broad feature, but the reason why I wanted to highlight it is a lot of times when I'm having discussions with folks, whether it's at a conference like this or talking with clients, the focus is always on what capabilities do we offer, what capabilities does our competition offer, can they do X, Y, or Z? And very little is the focus on overall usability, overall user experience. And I think it's important to note that you can have the best tools, the best resources, the best functionality on your site, but if people can't use it or they can't find it, it's literally useless. And so it was nice to see that the survey data did show out that, yes, the number one most important thing is having a site that people can navigate through.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Do you see a trend in that one where plan sponsors are looking for customization versus standardization? Because everybody has their own preferred method of work.
Yeah.
What they're going after. Do you see that creeping in there?
Yeah, so not so much customization. On the participant side, we're seeing more customization, especially personalization on the participant side. Yeah, on the sponsor side, I mean, they from what we've heard, they tend to like things like co-branding and having their logo slapped on the site. In terms of navigation and overall site UX, what's important we find are having quick links. So obviously the main menu is number one most important, but beyond that, having logical links positioned on the page that might be leading to related activities or things that might just be a natural follow-up to whatever they're looking on, that tends to go a really long way in terms of aiding overall site navigation, because that helps the fact that some people are used to a top nav bar, some like a mega menu, some like the old vertical bar, whereas having those related quick links, as long as they're designed properly, really tend to make an impact there. Does that make sense? Yeah. This slide is just a continuation of what we were talking about. This is the next 7 most important site features, and the trend of security, web design, and plan data is still dominating, although we are starting to see a little bit of emergence of plan administrative capabilities. The bottom one there is ability to administer plan contributions on the sponsor site, and there's also a little bit of participant information here with the appearance of, of how participants are investing their portfolios, making their way on the chart here. So now let's shift our focus back to mobile again for a little bit. And we had asked sponsors, in terms of accessing the capabilities via mobile, do they prefer a native app, a responsibly designed site, a good mobile browser site, or do they have no preference? They were provided a little bit of nuance in the response options, which you can see on the pie chart on the right, but it all boils down to those 3 statistics on the left. 48% of sponsors indicated that they prefer a native app. 36% actually prefer a mobile browser. 60% don't really care either way. And this data is not surprising at all. I'm sure you've all seen all sorts of different mobile research studies that almost unanimously say consumers, users, clients prefer native apps over a mobile browser. And I think the reason I wanted to point that out is I think it's important to note that a lot of times, like sponsors' digital preferences, it's not necessarily being set by the record keeper or even the record keeper's competitors. It's often being set by the sites, the companies they're interacting with on a daily basis. So, say plan sponsor A, what they want, what they expect in terms of what they can access via mobile isn't necessarily being set by, say, Fidelity or Empower or Vanguard or insert large record keeper here. It's being set by Twitter and Instagram and Netflix and Spotify and these sites that they're using every day. And so that's just something to keep in mind going forward. Now, we also asked sponsors, have they actually accessed any sponsor site features over the last year? And this slide was actually pretty surprising, because 63% answered that yes, they have accessed sponsor site features via mobile in the previous 12 months. Now, the reason why I say this is surprising is because we offer a competitive intelligence subscription service called Retirement Plan Monitor Institutional, which tracks 15 of the leading plan sponsor websites that are offered by record keepers. Of those 15 firms, most of which the sponsors in our survey belong to one of those 15 organizations, or their plan is record kept by one of those firms. Only one of those 15 currently offers a mobile app. And at the time of the survey, only 7 offers a responsively designed site so therefore it displays in an optimized fashion regardless of screen size. So about half of the sites we track actually make mobile access easy, but well over half of sponsors have accessed some features via mobile, which means a lot of them are actually going out of their way to do so, which means they're probably pulling out their phone, they're pulling out the full desktop site on their phone, having to magnify it, and needless to say, it's far from an ideal experience. Now, we also asked sponsors, what features do you actually want to have mobile access to? And we found that sponsor action items are actually dominating sponsor preferences in terms of what they want mobile access to. And this, again, makes sense if you think about it. We've spoken to a lot of sponsors about this, and they don't want their full website available to them on the phone. What's shaping their mobile demand, what's shaping what they want available to them is certain situations that they're finding themselves in. One anecdote that was shared to me by multiple sponsors that's sort of driving what they want on mobile is this. Say you're a sponsor, you get up from your desk, you're going to go run out to lunch. And an employee grabs you as you're walking out the door and says, hey, Drew, I think I tried changing my contribution rate. I'm not positive if it went through. Can you let me know what my current contribution rate is? And so as a sponsor, I don't have mobile access. I certainly have my phone in my pocket. God forbid I go anywhere without my phone in my pocket. But I said, I'm going to grab lunch now. Once I get back, I'll get back to you. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. By the time you get back from lunch and you sit back at your desk, there's no way you're remembering this. And so now, a couple days from now, that employee is now going to have to bother you again about it and might be a little annoyed. Whereas if I had a good app or even a reliable, responsive site, I could kind of just quickly right there pull it out, run a quick participant search and say, oh, hey, here, your current salary deferral rate is 7%, and then go on from there. Now, I just want to make something clear. Sponsors aren't saying, hey, I want to have to be bothered and I want to have to be able to do this on demand. It's more just allowing them the option to do it is what's important. So I just didn't want to get it, confused. It's not that they really want to always having to be bothered and be able to do this on demand. It's just, it's good to have the option to do that. Now that we've discussed, the fact that yes, the sponsor site is important, and now we've also discussed some of the key sponsor site features, the next question to ask is, how are record keepers doing in terms of meeting these needs and these preferences of sponsors? If you work for a record keeper organization, you might not be thrilled at these next few slides. Well, maybe you are. Maybe you do want to be shown that you guys have a lot of work to do. But first, some good news. We did just ask sponsors in the survey, hey, how satisfied are you with the digital capabilities being provided to you from your record keeper? 83% said they're either satisfied or very satisfied. Some slightly less ideal news, only 31% of those responses were very satisfied. That still sounds okay, but we do surveys like this in all sorts of different financial verticals, banking, credit card, DC plan participants, P&C insurance, brokerage, and these are towards the bottom of the barrel in terms of satisfaction rates when compared to other sites. Now, what specifically can these websites do to better meet the needs? I'm very happy you all just asked that because now I can talk about the DC Plan Sponsored Digital Audit. Our audit is a comprehensive analysis software that benchmarks a record keeper's DC plan sponsor site against its competitors. The primary purpose of this is to identify key gaps and offer strategic recommendations for how the site can close these competitive gaps and improve and become a leader. Now, the main way we do this is our audit framework. I keep mentioning these over 100 site attributes. That survey data is fueling the importance of ratings in our audit framework. Each of those site attributes is graded by the analysts on a 4-point scale. It's similar to a college GPA. 1 is fair, 1 is poor, 2 is fair, 3 is good, 4 is excellent. So we go through and grade the client plus all of their competitor websites, and that generates all these results, the recommendations, the best practices, et cetera. And one thing I do want to ask is just to keep these number ratings in mind on the ensuing slides, especially the 4 being an excellent, 3 being a good, and 2 being a fair, because we will be referencing this on some of the next slides. Now, this is just a quick encapsulation of what our audit framework is. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, there's a lot there. But in essence, the 6 blue boxes you see at the top, those are the 6 categories in the audit. Each category is broken down into subcategories. There's 22 total subcategories. Each of those subcategories is broken up into those attributes I referenced. That's the over 100 attributes. We grade every single attribute. Each attribute, subcategory, and category has an importance weighting, which is largely determined by our survey data plus some internal research we've done. All right, I'm definitely sick of talking and hearing my own voice. I'm sure most of you are as well at this point. So now I'm going to hand it over to Olivia to talk about some of our audit findings and some best practices.
Hi, everybody. So for this presentation, we conducted an audit of 10 different record keepers, plan sponsor websites, and you can see a list of the firms included here on this slide. And we wanted to understand how current platforms are performing in the areas that we identified as being particularly important through our survey work. So in aggregate, the group fell short of the good threshold with an average score of 2.83. And so to provide some context, only 2 firms in this audit surpassed the good threshold compared to 5 firms in a recent brokerage site audit. And so as you'll see in the coming slides, there are some areas where certain firms perform quite well, but all in all, there's a lot of opportunity for improvement. So participant data and management is the most heavily weighted category in the audit. It includes participant level data, participant search tools, and administrative services related to participants, so things like managing loan and withdrawal requests. And it's also the category where the 10 firms in the audit perform the best. So the graph on this slide comes from our audit software, and the red line represents the group average, which in this case is a 3.21. And you can also see that 8 firms surpassed the threshold for good, or the 3 on the horizontal axis. So the most important component in the participant data and management category is participant account data. And the group also scores high here with an average score of 3.27. Again, you'll see 8 firms surpass the threshold for good, but unfortunately that's the last time you'll see that in this presentation. So looking at the slides graph, you can kind of see that the firms fall into 4 tiers more or less. You've got 2 firms at the top with perfect scores or 4.0. The next 2 firms perform quite well, both averaging above a 3.5. Then you have 5 firms all qualifying pretty comfortably for good, and then you have the 2 laggards there at the bottom. So the participant search category, which looks at the tools that allow sponsors to find information about specific employees online, is also among the most important subcategories in the audit. And here, again, the group performs pretty well with an average of 3.18 and 7 firms qualifying for good. As you can see on the slide, we've got 1 firm with a 4.0, and then from there, there's a pretty steady decline down to 2, which you'll remember is the 4 threshold. So just to wrap up the participant data and management section, firms overall perform very well in this very important category, but failure to do so creates a significant competitive advantage for firms. So next we'll look at plan information, which is the second most important category in the audit. It includes plan level data, plan health resources, investment research tools and information, as well as plan documents. So firms perform moderately well here, falling just short of the good threshold with an average score of 2.92. And looking at the graph, you'll see 6 firms surpass the threshold for good, at which point there's a pretty significant drop-off. The plan overview component of the plan information category is the most important component, and it looks specifically at the plan data pages available on sponsor sites. So across all the components that comprise the plan information category, this is where firms perform the best, and yet the average still barely surpasses the threshold for good at 3.01. So because plan information is so important, we recommend that firms look to provide excellent experiences and invest more in their plan level data suites, plan health tools, investment research tools, and selections of plan documents. Okay, next we're going to look at plan administration. And this is where firms perform in aggregate the worst of any of the categories in the audit. The category covers tasks that sponsors can complete online and all the features associated with those processes. So it includes analysis of payroll submission tools and then the associated features like the file upload tool, help resources, and email notification options. Despite the low performance, we've seen that this is still a very important category. 80% of our survey respondents said it was very or extremely important. So with the average score of 2.42, again, that's the lowest of any category. Only 2 firms surpassed the threshold for good and 3 failed to meet the threshold for fair. So when looking at the survey data regarding the importance of both website and mobile features, it's clear that user management or the ability to grant other people access to the sponsor site is highly valued. Only 7 out of 10 of the firms in the audit provide these capabilities, but definitely the performance varied, with some firms offering really basic capabilities like adding and deleting users, and other firms offering capabilities like the option to temporarily disable users and customize their access levels on a plan-by-plan basis. So all in all, the 7 firms that actually have these capabilities have an average score of 3.07. So now we'll take a look at online contribution management, which includes resources for maintaining, correcting, and submitting contributions to record keepers, among a few other things. This is the highest weighted attribute in the plan administration category, and again, only 7 out of 10 firms offer such capabilities. Here you can see we have firms falling into 3 basic tiers: excellent, 3 firms qualifying as excellent, 3 firms qualifying as good, and then 1 qualifying as fair. So to wrap up the plan admin category, record keepers should look to add any of those key administrative features that are not currently available, and look to the best practices that we'll discuss shortly to enhance existing capabilities. So the last audit category we'll discuss is website design and usability, which comprises multiple top-rated features like the look and feel of sites, their navigation structures, and security features. Given that the category includes look and feel, the subpar average score of 2.73 probably doesn't come as a huge surprise. Here, only one firm qualifies as good, and the rest fall in the margins of fair. So the design, navigation, and information architecture is the second most highly weighted subcategory in the entire audit. One firm is earning an impressive 3.7, and from there you have a steady decline all the way down to 1.86 for an average of 2.71. So to wrap up the design and usability, the plan sponsor websites in this audit appear outdated and are less user-friendly than leading platforms across other financial verticals. And that goes back to something that Drew had mentioned earlier, where those are the websites that are setting users' expectations, including plan sponsors' expectations for their own sites. So while design may seem secondary to some of those important functionalities that we've just discussed, as Drew said, even the best tools do little to enhance a site if people can't use them or can't find them. So what are some sponsor site best practices? So we're going to look at some firms that perform particularly well in the categories we just discussed and identify some of the best practices that help them earn those high scores. We'll start by returning to participant data and management, where Fidelity is leader. In this slide, you can see Callout 1 highlights a sidebar menu that centralizes access to an abundance of plan data pages, as well as participant statements and resources for managing loans and withdrawals. The link adjacent to Callout 2 opens the participant emulated site experience, which lets sponsors view the participant site as though they were a specific employee, something that's really helpful when participants have questions about their own participant websites. And then the drop-down menu next to Callout 3 lets sponsors view all the participant data parsed by plan, contribution source, or investment. So AIG provides a notably user-friendly participant search tool that adheres to multiple best practices. First, you can see from Callout 1, the search tool is universally available as it lives in the static header. Callout 2, you can see that the search where sponsors enter their search criteria, which is flexible. The sponsors can search by employee name, employee ID, social security number, or account number. The results page provides key information immediately after sponsors have selected an employee, including basic plan information and contact information. And finally, the tool is fully predictive, meaning that as sponsors search, a list of matching employees appears, and then as they continue to type, that list filters accordingly. So that brings us to the plan information category, where Schwab performs particularly well. That's thanks in large part to its plan analytics tool, which is powered by a third-party company called DailyVest. And this slide shows the tool's dashboard. So slightly above Callout 1 and to the slightly above Callout 1 is the View By dropdown. So sponsors can basically see all of the applicable data within the tool, parsed by contribution sort, investment, or asset class. And if you look to the donut chart in adjacent to Callout 3, you'll see that the current view is contribution source. But if they were to select investment or asset class from the View By drop-down menu, that's the kind of thing that would update. So just below Callout 1, you can see a series of expandable sections, and those house tons of filter options. For example, sponsors can include or exclude any participant that owns a certain investment or asset class. They can also filter by employee plan information like the balance or the rate of return, as well as demographic information. So callout 2 highlights a chart with employee status information. So it notes the number of employees in groups like active contributors and non-contributors. And then sponsors can actually drill down to view information about the individual participants in each of those categories. And that's a feature that's integrated throughout the tool. And then finally, the drop-down adjacent to callout 4 lets sponsors change the date range of the data displayed throughout the tool. TIAA's suite of user management capabilities embody a lot of best practices as well. So the tab menu adjacent to callout 1 lists some of the actions sponsors can take, including adding new users, modifying existing users' permission levels, deleting and temporarily disabling them, and customizing their access levels. Sponsors first assign a user a role, and then from there they can customize not only what they can see, but also what tasks what actions they can take on the sponsor site, and they can do that on a plan-by-plan basis. Callout 4 shows the firm's unique copy user feature, which lets the sponsor assign a new user all the same permissions as an existing user. So that's really helpful when somebody's assigning access to a large group who may all have need the same permissions, like a team of auditors, or if they're assigning multiple people who have highly customized access level, let's say somebody who should only have access to very small portion of the site for a limited amount of time. So moving on to online contribution management, Fidelity is a leader here with multiple ways that sponsors can fund contributions. They can perform wire ACH transfers, and they can also elect to have Fidelity auto debit funds from a planned bank or forfeiture account. Sponsors can also perform multiple transactions at once, and as you can see from callout 2, they can configure email notifications for themselves as well as other designated users. And lastly, back to site design and navigation. On this slide, you'll see a list of best practices that both Principal and TIAA adhere to. So using Principal as an example, you can see from callout 1, they have a nice made menu that logically organizes content. When sponsors click on any of the tabs, they load quickly and they don't dissolve prematurely. And then the shading is used to indicate where users' current position in the menu is. So turning to TIAA, you can see the Actions Quick Link menu on the home page, which gives sponsors immediate access to key site areas related to a specific plan. Callout 3 highlights an expandable section on the homepage, which allows for this page, the homepage, to include a lot of information about a specific plan without appearing cluttered or overly long. And both of these firms have consistent design and main menus throughout. Finally, mobile access. Principal's site is fully responsive and renders well on all devices, and then TIAA is that one firm with the mobile app. So with that, I will hand the mic back to Drew to wrap things up and answer any questions.
So now, I know we've thrown a lot of information at you at this point, and so the last question we want to answer is, what are some key takeaways from this presentation? Obviously, we'd hope that you all retain everything we've said in this presentation, but that's obviously not likely. So if there are 5 takeaways you have from this presentation, it's what's on this slide here. First, and probably most obviously, the plan sponsor websites are critical to administering DC plans. I think that one speaks for itself, so we'll leave it at that. The second key takeaway is that sponsor websites are of growing importance in the RFP process, and it is quite literally winning and losing business for record keepers. And it goes beyond just the existence of the site. I know years ago in the RFP process, it was just, hey, check off this box that you offer a plan sponsor site. Now it's often getting into the nitty-gritty of the features, functionality, and sometimes even the user experience of these sites. So I'm not understating it when I say these sites are very important and can win or lose business. Third, many of the most important site attributes can be boiled down into 4 key buckets. Those are security, plan and participant information, web design, and plan administration. The reason for calling this out is I understand that a lot of firms that we've spoken to, a lot of firms I've spoken to at conferences like these, have told me that they've spent a lot of time in the past few years getting their participant site up to snuff. And now they're starting to shift the focus over to the plan sponsor experience, and there's a lot to take in. It can be overwhelming. So this, I mean, obviously we can help you with this in terms of prioritizing your roadmap, but also, focusing on one of these 4 buckets first might also help you prioritize your roadmap a little bit. Fourth is that sponsor sites are currently doing a fair job of addressing the needs and the preferences of sponsors, but there is significant room for improvement still. Now, the last takeaway ties into that, and it's that I know we've been very critical throughout this entire presentation and fairly negative, but I do want probably the biggest takeaway to be that there's certainly hope. Those best practices that we showed are some of the things that leading record keepers are currently doing that score very highly in our audit and do serve as best practices. And you can look at some of those sites, plus some of the sites you use on a daily basis on your own outside of the financial services to help understand how to create a better web experience for sponsors and to help turn your plan sponsor website into a competitive advantage. So that is all we have for our presentation today. As Olivia said, we do have some time for Q&A now. Also, if you're a bit shy, you don't want to offer up a question here, our contact information is on the screen. Please feel free to use that. Literally my favorite part of the job that I have here at Corporate Insight is the client and prospect interaction. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have questions. And we'll also be at the booth throughout the conference, so you can feel free to stop by and we're happy to talk about whatever you'd like. So with that, thank you. And does anybody have any questions they'd like to address here?
So your categorization of best practices,
Mm-hmm.
is that your own internally developed framework, or
It's
some guideline?
Yeah, there's actually a lot. That's a good question. We have if someone didn't hear it, he kind of asked sort of how do we develop our best practices in essence, if it's just a framework or if there's other aspects that go into it. So we have a lot of things that go into how we're developing these best practices. Yes, our audit is one of the things that helps generate it, but we have an in-house user experience lab, for example. We hired this gentleman named Adam Holnick a couple of years ago who's been a leader in like the UX space for I think like 20 or so years now, and he leads all of our in-house UX research. One of the things that we can do that really I think differentiates some of the stuff we do from what a lot of firms can do on their own is not only can we run UX testing on a certain site, but then we can also benchmark it against a bunch of the competitors, have people run through the client site plus some other leading sites to get some true firsthand data on how they feel about this site compared to some of the leaders. And so that testing that we do pretty often helps inform some of these best practices as well. And then go back to the joke I made about how we've been doing this since 2006 when I was a senior in high school. Like, we have been doing it for a while, and I'm constantly talking to record keepers, sponsors, participants, and a lot of these conversations help kind of shape what the industry is thinking, what people individually are thinking, and then we have our survey data. So there are a lot of inputs that go into helping to form these best practices.
I have a quick one.
Yep.
Have you exposed the important categories against the volumes of those things? Especially if somebody's going through any kind of digital transformation, right? And it might not necessarily go with the most important category because the volume's going to be low.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take a look at where's your highest ROI when you're going to invest in transformation.
Yeah, so that comes into, and so that's one of the things that we've, when we ask about how people are using the site, that data is just as important as sponsors saying this is important or that's important. Because when you present people with a long list of attributes and say, rate these, there's always going to be a little bit of, hey, this sounds great on paper. Educational resources is actually a perfect example of that. Whenever you put like educational resources on one of these surveys, you always get 60, 70, 80% of people like, yeah, this would be great, this is important. And then when you ask them, okay, what have you used in the last 12 months? Like 15, 20% have actually said they use it. That often is like an engagement gap. A lot of times we find people aren't even aware that they have these things available to them on the sites. So again, that speaks to sort of the web design and navigation importance. But it's just also the nature of some of these surveys. So for that reason, that website usage data is just as important as the sponsors indicating what they're deeming more and less important. Any other questions? Nope. All right, well, I'll give you all a couple days left in your day. Thank you so much for joining us today.